right, 3x pitch biometrics analysis up here of Zach. Got you at 79 here, coming out of leg lift. You see how your hip kicks up like that? And when your hip abduction was 40 degrees, so your hips are really, really tight to the point where it hits into range right here and it gets stuck and it starts kicking your pelvis towards the target because that is so tight right there. We just need to make sure that that's not an anatomical end of range. I mean, like you're bone on bone. Do you feel any pinches in your hip, like hard pinches? So you're probably not end of range, like what's called basically bone on bone, but there's a medical term for it, I forgot. So you're hitting into range there, meaning your hip can't go in flexion anymore, and it's causing your knee to collapse. So your knee is pushing down because of it. And that's really hard because now you can't get down and squat into that leg like most hard throwers do. So really got to work on that somehow. Is it the adductor too tight? We've got to work on that hip mobility, get that hip abduction, that leg to want to come up, so we can keep lowering and keeping stability in this leg, which keeping stability in your leg is keeping it externally rotated. So you're just basically collapsing your leg. So you're you're trying to get to the point where you want to sit and drive and you can't. So your front foot opens and your leg just collapses down. So that's probably why you're having a hard time popping the plate. And in a linear position, it's easier for you. When you go to the lateral position, that's probably where it's going to be even harder to pop the plate. So that's really what we got to work on. Why am I stuck in my hip? Why can't I continue to move forward and down the same rate? Why am I having a hard time squatting into the back leg without the knee collapsing? Like I need to open internal up, I need to open abduction up, extension. I really need to open these hips up. So at front foot strike, you can see you're timing your trunk really late, which is good. So you can see you're good at cocking your arm late, keeping your shoulders closed. You're getting some separation there, but because there's not a lot of force behind your hip, your trunk is catching up as your hips start to open. So if we go to the kinematic sequencing, which is how it's sequencing and rotation, separation would be measured in how well you're separating your hip, which is your red line, from your trunk, which is your green line. You can see they're stacked. That red should be over here where that glove is. And you can see your hip is starting early, but it's not peaking early. It's peaking when the trunk is peaking right here. We want it to peak all the way back here where that glove is peaking. So the glove is driving rotation for you. And we want the hip to drive rotation, the glove to work with the trunk as it goes into rotation. So that's what happens is when we don't have separation between hips and shoulders, everything starts peaking together, which we see here, and you don't get a lot of speeds, just over 1100 degrees per second. So everything is going to finish up right. If that hip peaked earlier and then the trunk peaks later, the trunk will actually go forward, and that's what we need to get to happen. So if we look at the linear sequencing, so this is how it was at sequencing like this in rotation, and we can see there's no separation in rotation. Let's see how it's sequencing as it goes forward, as the hip pushes forward, as the trunk pushes forward. And you can see the trunk pushes forward right here first, and then the hip pushes forward. So the trunk is actually sequencing before the hip. And when the trunk actually opens up, the trunk linear speeds are actually shutting off. So your trunk peaked going forward when it was closed, and then when it opened, it just shut off going forward. We'd want, as the trunk is opening, we'd still want those linear forces peaking, because that would be pushing the trunk forward. Okay? And that really goes all the way back to your leg collapsing, because that's the energy you're pushing to the target. It's collapsing, so there's not a lot of it. So when you land, all you have is the spinning energy. Makes sense? So we have to get that leg so we can get down, we can push, and then that carries all that linear energy forward. That's what's going to push the trunk forward. So if I go to here and look at the chest orientation, right here, you can see your chest is only going forward 5 degrees. A high velocity pitcher's trunk would be 45 to 50 degrees forward. So you're about 40 degrees short. And like I said, the trunk is the biggest predictor of velocity, and your trunk's only going 5 degrees. And a big leaguer's going 45, 50 degrees. So they're going to be able to generate so much more power than you because they're actually moving the biggest part of the body towards the target where all the energy is. So that's why all this stuff we're teaching you off the plate and driving, that's what creates all that linear force that we have to get going that you're having a hard time with. If pitch release 2, you look at contralateral tilt, you're about 19 degrees. That's actually good. So your trunk orientation as far as left to right is good. It's just not getting it going forward is the problem. And that's why you're having to use your arm too much, is because your trunk's not driving the energy, so your arm's having to drive the energy. Okay. So we have to work on mobilizing the hips, powering the lower half, separating the hips and shoulders to carry the trunk forward, and that's where you're going to make it. See you next year. All right, man. Hey, all right, you leaving right now?
Yeah, well, I'm leaving tonight at 3 in the morning.
All right, dude. Well, enjoyed having you here, dude.
I'll be back.
Good. Okay.